Hi everybody, this is John Watkins. In late August, Margaret and I took a trip to Teton Country. We had stayed a few nights in Stanley, Idaho, and we drove down to Driggs on the Idaho side of the Tetons for 2 nights, and then we went over and spent a couple of nights in the park at the Jackson Lake Lodge. How was it? Well, come along and we'll show you. After spending time in the Sawtooth Mountains in Stanley, the drive on Idaho Highway 93 is much different, much more arid. A lot of farming, as you can see. For some reason in Idaho, the hay bales are square, which actually seems to make sense. Here in Georgia, where we're from, they're all round. But this is pretty much what we saw along the journey. And this is a view from the overlook about 16 miles outside of Driggs on the west side of the Teton Range. You can see the Grand Tetons in the distance. It's quite a beautiful view from here. Not the view from the other side you're probably used to seeing, but it is quite beautiful. We did find some views of the backside of the Tetons just outside of Driggs, but you really have to look for them. Our stay in Driggs was marred by a bad hotel experience and was nothing to write home about, so we're going to skip that. We did venture about an hour outside of Driggs on the Mesa Falls Scenic Byway, which we highly recommend, as you'll see. This is Lower Mesa Falls on the Mesa Falls Scenic Byway, and it is really spectacular. And here's a close-up. And even closer. Sorry for the shaky video. And here's a favorite photograph. Here we are at the Upper Falls. Wow, that water's going. And it flows down here. Really amazing. It has another tier. You can see that tier, and then if you pan back, we'll see the huge part of the falls. And do it again. Really something. And here's the water flowing down the river to the lower falls. It says on some of the information here that this river supports a lot of the agriculture in the area, and on the way up from Driggs we drove through some of the just beautiful farmland. It looks very prosperous, rolling hills, very similar to the Palouse area in Washington State, and also extends into the western border of Idaho, but we're here on the close to the eastern border. So this water is really critical in these semi-arid areas. And here's another view of the Upper Falls. This is probably the broadest view, or one of them, you get. It's amazing. It's like similar to Niagara Falls almost. Mesa Falls was truly amazing. Here's one of my favorite photographs. We were at Harriman State Park in late August 2022. This is near the Mesa Scenic Byway. It's actually off of Highway 20. And it's, if you're going north on the Scenic Byway, you take a left. And it's just down after you take a left turn on the right. And this is railroad. It was originally railroad property. And Mr. Harriman was one of the railroad barons, and he not only, I guess, owned this piece of property, which is quite attractive right near Yellowstone, he also financed a extensive scientific journey by boat to Alaska with John Muir and other scientific luminaries of the day. This is Harriman State Park. Some of the ranch buildings and properties. And, you know, given the railroad influence and money, not surprisingly, they are pretty nice looking structures. First building we passed was the manager's house, and see some of the other buildings as we walk down the path. This is the boys' house. It says 1902, and this is the ranch office, park employee residence, 1902. So that gives you an idea of when these were put in. About 120 years ago. In case you're wondering, the night sky is pretty dark just outside of Driggs. However, we did see a lot of light pollution, and we didn't really find any outstanding locations, but I'm sure a local could probably show you some really good places for night photography. We had better luck in the park, which was our next destination. We're here in Great Teton National Park, and I just wanted to stop and capture this classic view of the Grand Tetons. This is, you know, the typical shot you see in magazines and videos about the area. And this is just off the Loop Road, just a little bit north of the south entrance. But you get views of the Tetons like this from all over in the park. They're just dominant in the scene. Very pretty. And this is Jenny Lake, the Jenny Lake's Visitor Center. It's very pretty here, but it is crowded. We are here on around 4-ish on a Friday afternoon, and it's really not bad, relatively speaking, in terms of the crowds, but a lot of times you can't even get a parking space in the parking lot. And the Jenny Lake store was just full of people. Very unpleasant to be in. It's pretty, and you can see why people want to come here. So this is the Jenny Lake Visitor Center and store. And you know, you can kind of see, even though it's died down, it's just really still a lot of people here. And I think part of the problem is they bring a lot of tour buses in here. Yeah, for a good reason. But there are other quieter places in the park that are really pretty too. But just so you know, this is what it's like. This is what it's like when it's really not that busy. The park is known as one of the world's great photography locations, so I spent more time on photography than on videography on this trip. Here's one of my favorite views at String Lake Bridge. One of the most iconic views of the Tetons is at the Snake River Overlook, where Ansel Adams took his famous photograph of the Tetons. Is it better in color or black and white like Ansel used? I kind of like the black and white. Another iconic view is of the Moulton Barn on Mormon Row. Unfortunately, it's become so popular, it's hard to find it without a bunch of tourists emptying off a tour bus. But it's their park too, and they have a right to be here. Here's a view from the back of the Jackson Lake Lodge, which is a really great place to stay. And if you happen to catch it after a storm has rolled through, wow. And here's another view of Jenny Lake. Beautiful. The Tetons are one of my favorite places in the world for night sky photography. Here we see a view of the Teton Range at Jackson Lake near the marina. And here's the Milky Way at Oxbow Bend. We're looking basically back towards Driggs at this location. And here we are seeing the Milky Way over the Tetons at String Lake Bridge, one of my favorite locations in the world. But on this trip, this moody shot of Jenny Lake and the Milky Way over the Grand Teton might have been my favorite. As we were packing up and getting ready to go to Yellowstone, we took one last look at the Teton Range from the back of the Jackson Lake Lodge. One of our favorite views in the world. It was really good to see it again. So that was our trip to Teton Country. What are some final thoughts? Well, there are different opinions on this, but for my money, Driggs was not a particularly convenient area to explore Teton Country. There's not a lot within easy driving distance of Driggs that we found. And going from Driggs into Jackson and the national park is quite a drive, and you have to go through Teton Pass. So if you're there, especially for the first time, my recommendation would be to find accommodations or campsite in Jackson or in the park itself. Second of all, it was just, as always, just magical. It's just a wonderful place. And if you haven't visited Great Teton National Park, you really need to put it on your list. It's just beautiful. Every time we go, we're just amazed. Well, we'll see you next time. Thank you.